Hello, creative, and welcome back to the Empowered Creatives podcast, finding confidence between hustle and burnout. I'm your host, Victoria Hines, creative career coach, helping creatives like you navigate your career hurdles. I have a little announcement to make before I dive into this week's episode. So this will be the last episode of season 1. As I mentioned on the podcast a few months ago, I'm already out on my nomadic journey, and part of that involves going over to Southeast Asia with my new boyfriend for a few weeks, which I'm super excited about, but I decide intentionally I needed to not work during that time. So I'll be taking the second half of January, February, and most likely March to refocus on other endeavors that need my attention. But do not worry, I will be back this spring with all new episodes just for you. So looking forward to that. If you're wanting more updates, you can always subscribe to my newsletter list by heading over to my website. All right, I think that's the big update I needed to share with you. So I was really ruminating for a while on what I wanted this last episode to be, to share with you all before we take a little hiatus or a little break. And I had a bunch of ideas mulling around in my head. And then, kind of like my conversation with Zach Smith last week, you never really know when creative inspiration is going to hit. And funny enough, this week's episode is inspired by Top Gun Maverick. Yes, you did hear that right. I actually watched that movie. I was looking for a movie that felt like something I could, would be fun to watch with my parents over the holidays. And I was watching that movie a few weeks back. And there's this moment where, I promise, no spoilers. This isn't going to spoil anything. Maverick's talking to a younger character named Rooster in this movie. And he essentially tells him that to be a great pilot and be better at what he does, he can't think. And think about it this way, like they are operating these planes at insane speeds. And he was saying basically to stop thinking and to just get into your gut and instincts. There's a time to think and there's a time to just stop and trust what your instincts are telling you to do. And that moment really hit me as something I wanted to share with y'all because I think it's definitely been a big lesson for me in 2022 and something I want to carry forward into the new year is being very intentional around my energy. And what I mean by that is being intentional of when it's time to go, when it's time to slow, and when it's time to stop. And all three of those things are very important and vital to our health. And I think knowing when is the right time for each of these different types of energy in your life, I think might actually be one of the biggest keys and biggest indicators on how to avoid hustle and how to avoid burnout, which is what this podcast is all about. So this episode, we're going to dive into, or I'm going to share some signs, symptoms, or maybe things to look out for that can let you know the next time of when you need to go, when you need to slow, or when you need to stop. Finding that right balance in your career is incredibly difficult as a creative. If you are lacking time, energy, or money to do the thing that you love, it might be time to figure out what needs to change. If you have no idea where to start, I encourage you to grab my free Creative Career Audit. This worksheet will walk you through a process to help you identify what's bringing you joy in your work and what really needs to go. You can head to my website at www.victoriahines.com or grab the direct link in the show notes below. Alrighty, back to the show. So let's talk about when to go. And go can mean a couple different things. Go can mean creating, producing, doing, putting yourself out there, just taking action. Go can also mean action in a different sense of making big changes, taking the jump, going in a different direction, letting go of something. So here are 4 things that can clue you in on when it's time to go. So clue number 1, something feels off or you've lost the magic. Now, this is a clue to go, as in something needs to change. You need to go in a new direction. You need to take action and make some changes in your life. This was a big indicator for me that my time in Chicago was at an end. This chapter wasn't feeling as fulfilling. I wasn't feeling the magic in that city anymore. And no matter what I did, I just felt like something was off. I couldn't tell you what it was. I couldn't put it into language. I couldn't think my way out of the situation. There was just something in my gut that felt off and felt like the inspiration, the magic, the energy that I had once experienced was gone, or I couldn't find it. So that's symptom number 1 of when it's time to go. Number 2, the fear of taking a leap is nowhere near the fear of staying exactly where you are. You know, there's always a tipping point in change, in deciding to go with change instead of keeping the status quo. And usually this is the tipping point, in its most quintessential terms, when the fear of jumping becomes so much less than the fear of standing still. You know it's time to go. You know it's time to make changes in your career, in your relationships, in your art, when that fear of making a big drastic change is no longer as scary as closing your eyes and asking yourself, if you were in this same place 5 years from now, what do you feel in your gut? So that's clue number 2. Clue number 3 of when to go is you've tried every other remedy. Something's off. Maybe you've lost the magic. You've been experimenting for a while. You've tried fixing it. You've tried making changes. You've tried making shifts. Maybe this is in your business. You've tried a lot of different tactics, techniques with an offering that you've put out there, and nothing seems to be working. Maybe it's time to let it go or loosen the reins a little bit and open yourself up to the possibility of something new, going in a new direction. It doesn't mean that you can't come back to the thing that you were working on, the offering or what you were producing, but it might just be a sign that it's time to stop trying so hard or stop focusing on this one thing so intently and open yourself up to going in a new direction. Now, this 4th symptom is actually a little bit of a different type of energy. And the 4th one of when you know it's time to go is when the energy is there. You don't think and you just need to move. Now, this is probably after a big change or shift, and you feel recuperated, you feel recharged, you feel ready to go. This is another moment where you almost need to turn the brain down a couple notches. You've been thinking your way through everything, and you just need to take that energy, momentum, and speed and just fly with it. This is actually the period in my life that I think I'm entering, especially with traveling and all of the different changes and things I'm going to be shifting in the next 6 months. I think this is definitely going to be a time where I just need to go. I can't think and overthink things. I just need to say yes and yes and yes and do the thing that comes to mind with whatever time I have. And if I don't have the time or energy, I'm not doing it. So for a little recap, here are the 4 symptoms or clues that it's time to go. So something feels off. Your fear of taking a leap is nowhere near your fear of staying exactly where you are. You've tried every other remedy, or your energy is there and it is ready to go. So how about the next one? When to slow. Now, slow doesn't mean stopping, but slow does mean you're going to kind of turn down the volume, turn down the pace on everything that you've been doing, the actions that you're taking. Take a little bit more time and intention between each one. So, what's the first time it's time to slow? Well, it's probably fairly obvious exhaustion. Clue number one is exhaustion. If you are feeling exhausted by small little tasks, if it's been a long day, if you've been going, and you are feeling exhausted, it's time to slow down. It means you are keeping a pace that is no longer sustainable for you. Clue number two is you don't have time to appreciate your progress or celebrate your wins. If you take a step back and realize that you're no longer enjoying the day-to-day of your work, of what you are creating, or you can't remember the last time you've celebrated an accomplishment of doing something you've never done before, or a really big win like selling your first piece of artwork or having your first gallery show or finishing your first draft, it might mean that it's time to slow down and learn to appreciate the process again. Your third clue is your body and brain feel disconnected. We've all had that feeling where we're kind of just going through the motions. We know what we need to do, but it just becomes monotonous. We start feeling like robots a little bit, and none of us are as creatives really thrive in robot mode, to put it safely. So when you feel like your body and brain, like your body's going through the motions or your brain's going through the motions, but you just don't feel connected to your heart, or something feels off, or you just feel bleh, it's probably another very big sign to slow down and get very intentional again about your actions. Reconnect your body and mind together. All right, the third one, when to stop. Now, what I find interesting about a stop is a stop can also be a pause. A stop doesn't mean that you are fully stopping something and never going back to it. It can mean that, but not always. Sometimes it just means a pause. Now, this could be a week pause. This could be a couple months pause, like producing this podcast. It could be a 5-year pause, like a draft of your book, and then you come back to it in 5 years. But here are 3 key signs that it's time to stop. Sign number 1, you're churning your wheels but don't seem to be moving forward. Again, this is another moment where you are going through the motions. You're maybe doing everything right. You feel like you are doing all of the hard work. You feel like you've been doing everything that you've been told. You are pushing and pushing and pushing and producing and moving and doing, but nothing seems to be happening. That's probably a very big key sign that it is a time to stop and reassess. This is actually one of my personal biggest hurdles. I'm a generator, which means I have an insanely amount of energy and can just keep going and going and going and going and going. And when I get an idea or launch a project or uh, want to make something into reality, once it gets started, I just keep going. And it becomes very hard for me to clue into, okay, but is this something that should perpetually keep going, or do you need to eventually stop? And my ability to put the brakes on myself is very, very difficult. I just, you focus on all the things you lose, like your loss of investment, or you feel like you've invested so much and you don't want to lose all of that time, energy, and emotion that you've put into something. But if you're just not seeing the progress or not feeling the accomplishments, even though you're taking time to feel those, there's just nothing, you're just not seeing that progress, then it really is time to stop and reassess. Clue number 2, this one's a big out. This is burnout. I know we've talked about burnout on this podcast before, but for those of you who this might be your first episode, burnout is, well, nitty-gritty nuts and bolts, burnout is unreleased stress. It's when stress is built up over and over and over and over again over time, and it doesn't know where to go in your body. And basically, your body rebels and can't function. You lose interest. You might not find any joy. It can lead to depression. It can cause just like an absolute loss of purpose. It feels awful. And if you experience moments of burnout, you start experiencing some of these signs, you feel like there is a never ending amount of stress and it's not going anywhere. It is time to stop, take a break, walk away, push it away, look the other direction. It's time to give yourself space to relax, tune back into yourself, and maybe you'll come back to it and bring that project or endeavor or work back into your life. Clue number 3 of when to stop is parts of your life feel neglected. This can happen to all of us. I know part of my big adventure, part of the career choices I have made in my life is because when I start to feel like my career or my life, my personal life, my relationships, my health, moving things forward that I want outside of my career, when all of those get put on the back burner over and over and over and over again for my work, then something is wrong. So instead of multitasking and trying to do it all, like having the family, having the career, having the business, having the 9-to-5 job, and going after it all, maybe it's time to take a pause, take a stop, and reassess and ask yourself, is this the time that I should be working on all of these different projects? Is this when I should be doing this? As I say this, I think when to stop is one of the hardest things for me to focus on. I know when to go. I know when something needs to change. I can recognize now when to slow. That took me a while to learn, but when to stop, when to just say enough is enough and I need to walk away, that is incredibly difficult. But by honoring all 3 of these different types of energies, going, slowing, stopping, that is what is going to keep you from stepping into the toxic culture of hustle or the dreaded dark pit of burnout. By figuring out what keys in your body, what is telling you, hey, you need to go. You need to do something. You need to make a change. You need to just stop thinking and do it. Or when your gut or instinct is telling you, hey, you need to slow down. Hey, you can't keep going at this pace. Hey, this is too much right now. Just let's take it back a few notches. Or maybe that little voice is telling you, hey, you've got to stop. You're burning out. This is hurting your body. This is hurting your life. This is hurting you. This isn't working. Just stop. Being able to listen to that voice, I think, is one of the hardest things to learn, but also one of the biggest value drivers that you will find in your creative career that will help it to last decades upon decades instead of burning out in just a few years. Your one thing this week, creative, is to ask yourself, in the past, what have been signs for you of when you needed to go, when you needed to slow, or when you needed to stop? I want you to go ahead and write this down on a sheet of paper. Think of a moment when you needed to make a change or you needed to just take action. Think of a moment of when you needed to slow down, and think of a moment in when you needed to stop. What internal or external signs told you that this was the right time to take this sort of action? All right, creative. With that being said, if you've been enjoying the podcast, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Again, this will be the last episode of season 1, but I will see you back later this spring in 2023. Until the next time, stay creative.